England isn't just castles and fog, it's claws, whispers, and things that move in the dark. Beneath its green hills and cobbled streets lies a mythic underworld of spectral hounds, shrieking witches, and shapeshifters born from nightmares. These aren't bedtime stories, they're warnings, and many were never meant to be spoken aloud. From mist soaked moors to haunted churches, we're diving into 30 of the most terrifying mythical creatures in English folklore. Some watch, some wait, some walk right behind you. Welcome to the dark side of history. Before we descend into the shadows, hit that subscribe button if you love spine chilling legends and the monsters that history tried to bury. And while you're here, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Midnight, 3 a.m., broad daylight. Let's see who's really tempting fate. 1. Black Shuck. They say if you hear heavy paws behind you on a mist-laced road in East Anglia, don't turn around. Not because you might see something, but because you'll wish you hadn't. Black Shuck is England's most infamous phantom hound, and for nearly 1,000 years, it has patrolled the hedgerows, coastal paths, and crumbling ruins of East Anglia. It's not a beast you fight, not one you escape. It's the one you meet when time runs out. A dog the size of a small pony, eyes like hellfire, fur like a thundercloud, and a silence that screams louder than any howl. This isn't just a ghost story. It's a regional terror. Generations of East Anglians whispered about it behind closed doors. They didn't just believe in Black Shuck, they expected him. The creature's most famous appearance exploded into the parish records on August 4th, 1577, during a hailstorm that crashed over the town of Bungay. Lightning ripped open the sky as villagers huddled inside St. Mary's Church, thinking they'd found sanctuary. Then the door blew open. A monstrous hound burst into the nave, black as coal and trailing smoke. Witnesses said it moved like a storm given legs. It tore down the aisle, striking 2 men dead, snapped necks, scorched bodies. Then it vanished as suddenly as it appeared, leaving behind a claw mark scorched into the church door. That mark is still there, and you can still visit it. That same day, 10 miles away in Blytheburg, Black Shuck allegedly struck again, killing more congregants and shattering stone. This wasn't just folklore anymore, it was a coordinated haunting, a death delivered in duplicate. But what is Black Shuck exactly? Some say it's a grim, I him, the spectral guardian of sacred grounds. Others call it a death portent. See it once and someone you love dies. See it twice and it's your turn. Some accounts say it floats. Others say it walks like a man. Every version agrees. It watches and it waits. Folklorists trace its roots back to Viking raiders who brought tales of Odin's black dogs across the North Sea. But East Anglia made it local, rural, real. This wasn't the stuff of castles or courts. It was a terror for commoners, for farmers walking back from the alehouse, for shepherds staring too long into the fen. And unlike many mythical creatures, Black Shuck hasn't mellowed with time. In 1901, a young boy near Leiston ran home crying, claiming a huge black dog had stalked him through the woods without ever touching the ground. In 1974, a couple driving near Cromer reported a shadowy dog with glowing eyes keeping pace with their car before vanishing. And in 2014, a 7-foot skeleton of a dog was discovered under the ruins of Leiston Abbey, fueling whispers that the truth had always been underfoot. What makes Black Shuck truly terrifying isn't just the death omens or the hellhound lore, it's the silence, the soft pad of something that shouldn't be there. The fact that everyone in East Anglia seems to have a friend of a friend who saw it, that you could be walking home from the pub, feeling a little too alone, and suddenly the air just drops. No birds, no wind, just breath on your neck, and you never even saw its eyes.
But if you do, they say they burn like coals in the night, not angry, not cruel, just inevitable, which brings us to Yorkshire, where the road bends darker still. Another black dog waits there, but this one doesn't just predict death, it carries it. Shapeshifter, bone splitter, the Barghest. 2. Barghest York is a city steeped in layers. Romans below, Vikings in the middle, tourists on top, but in the shadows between stone alleyways and fog throttled fields, something waits, with eyes like lanterns and a growl that feels too close. You don't hear it first, you feel it in your gut, in your bones, the cold breath of a fate that's been following you your whole life, waiting for just the right moment. They call it the Barghest. This is no ordinary black dog legend. This thing doesn't just show up to nod at death, it brings it in like a loyal hound dragging in a corpse shaped stick. In Yorkshire, the Barghest is an omen wrapped in fur and nightmare. It prowls the country roads around Whitby, stalks the crags of the Yorkshire dales, and haunts the very veins of the old Roman walls encircling York. The name itself is slippery, possibly from Berggeist, meaning town ghost, or from Beargeist, German for spirit of the grave. It doesn't matter, the meaning is clear enough. If you see the Barghest, something's ending. A chapter, a life, maybe your own. Unlike the silent menace of Black Shuck, the Barghest is noisy, claws clicking on cobblestone, a howl that rattles teeth, chains sometimes, sometimes the sound of dragging, and always, always those burning eyes, sometimes red, sometimes yellow, always wrong. It doesn't stick to one shape either. While it usually appears as a monstrous black dog the size of a calf, with teeth like carved stone and a tail that lashes like a whip, some tales say it can take other forms: a headless man, a white cat, even a black rabbit with too many teeth. But the dog is the one that's stuck, maybe because it makes the most sense. What better form for a predator that can both follow and fetch? One of the oldest Barghest stories comes from the moors outside York, where a traveler spotted the dog perched on a stile at twilight. The man, being the bold sort, swung his walking stick at the creature. It passed through empty air. The next day, he collapsed in the street, just gone. No one was surprised. Not really. In some versions of the myth, the Barghest foretells not just one death, but many. It's a spectral prophet of mass tragedy. In the 18th century, villagers in Thirsk claimed to see the dog before a fire swept through their barns. In the 20th, it was whispered about before a string of drownings in a local river. Whether the cause was nature, negligence, or something else entirely, the Barghest was blamed or credited, depending on who you ask. But perhaps the scariest part of the Barghest isn't its bark or its bite, it's that it doesn't always appear to the doomed. Sometimes it comes to their friends, their family, a silent notification that something terrible is about to arrive. It's not just a phantom, it's a message, and sometimes there's no time to read it. Today, you'll still hear stories from Dale's farmers and urban night shift workers alike. I was walking home, they say, and I swear I saw something at the edge of the hedge, or it was behind me, I didn't look, I just kept walking. That's the secret. Don't look, don't challenge it, don't ask questions, just walk, because the Barghest might follow. But the moment you acknowledge it, the moment you see it, is the moment it stops being just a story. And Yorkshire isn't done with black dogs yet. Follow those same stone paths a little farther, and you'll start hearing softer sounds, slow, deliberate pads on wet ground, breathing right behind you. That's not the Barghest anymore. That's Padfoot.
Two creatures in, and we've already seen death that walks and dread that follows. If you're into this kind of folklore-fueled nightmare fuel, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what's hiding in the next story. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Are you somewhere safe in daylight, or are you watching alone after dark? We're keeping track. 3. Padfoot. Padfoot doesn't announce itself. It doesn't burst through church doors or scream across moors. It simply arrives, quiet, steady, and far too close. Unlike the wild roar of the Barghest, Padfoot is the nightmare you almost forget until it's right behind you, breathing down your collar. This spectral black dog haunts the old tracks and quiet backroads of Yorkshire, a land already thick with ghost stories and centuries of stone memory. But Padfoot is different. It doesn't come with fire or fury. It comes with the sound of footsteps that aren't yours, just behind you, always just behind you. The name Padfoot might sound gentle at first, almost quaint. It evokes softness, paw prints in dust, the shuffle of a dog following its master home. But that's how it gets you. Padfoot is a trickster of tone. The horror isn't in its howl, it's in its hush. Locals in Yorkshire, particularly around Wakefield and Leeds, have long passed down stories of this haunting presence. A traveler walking alone hears the unmistakable sound of paws brushing through wet leaves. A woman heading home late feels the heaviness of breath at her back. And when they turn, nothing, not a thing, but the pressure doesn't lift. If anything, it intensifies. Sometimes it's accompanied by a scent, damp fur, burnt air, or the sharp tang of something metallic. Sometimes there's no smell at all, just a sense, a feeling in the skin, as if the hairs on your neck are reacting to something they understand better than your brain does. Padfoot is said to appear as a large, jet black hound, its eyes glowing with a faint light, not blazing like black shucks or barghests, but more like dying coals, faint, flickering, and yet impossible to ignore once you've seen them. But here's the twist. Padfoot isn't always seen. In fact, its most terrifying trait may be its invisibility. It's heard, felt, sometimes even smelled, but rarely witnessed in full. This absence gives it power. You can't fight what you can't see, and it can follow you for miles. One of the more chilling details in the lore is that Padfoot is often described as walking in sync with its victim, step for step, as if mocking them or mirroring them. You slow down, it slows down. You stop, it waits. You run, it doesn't chase, it just follows. Folklorists link Padfoot with the broader family of spectral hounds, what scholars call black dog apparitions. But Padfoot's behavior is more psychological than most. It doesn't rip or tear, it wears you down. It's the sound of anxiety itself, a haunting externalized. It doesn't want to kill you. It wants to remind you that you're not alone and never were. Some regional versions say if you speak to Padfoot or even acknowledge it, it vanishes but leaves a part of itself behind, a shadow on your wall that wasn't there before, a paw print in your kitchen dust, a breath in your dreams. Others say Padfoot is a warning, like the Barghest.
It predicts death, but not in a grand, dramatic way. It doesn't shout that the end is near. It just walks quietly beside you until you finally understand what it came to say, and then it's gone. It's a legend tailor-made for late walks home, for lonely shifts, for empty villages where the wind makes promises it doesn't keep. Padfoot is the fear that stalks with you, not to harm, but to remind you how thin the world really is. And Yorkshire has one more shadow waiting in the wing. Just when you thought one black dog was enough, the skriker arrives, shapeless, shrieking, and laced with something older than fear.
4. Screaker. If Padfoot is the whisper on the moors, then the skriker is the scream. It's not just another black dog. This one shrieks, not howls, not barks, but an unholy wail that tears through the air like a cracked violin string, long, sharp, and sour, the kind of sound that sticks behind your eyes even after the silence returns. The skriker hails from Lancashire, a land of old mills, tangled woods, and towns stitched together with fog and forgotten rail lines. It lurks where things fall apart, abandoned crossroads, overgrown graveyards, and lonely moorland paths, places where the land feels a little too quiet, too hollow. Its name, Skriker, comes from an old northern word meaning screech or shriek. You don't mistake this one for anything else. It doesn't pad softly or float behind you. It arrives loud, unnatural, wrong, and the moment you hear it, you've already stepped too close. In its most common form, the skriker appears as, you guessed it, a large black hound. But unlike Padfoot or Black Shuck, it's never just a dog. It's often described as glimmering, wet looking, twisted in shape, as if it's been melted and reassembled. Its eyes glow, but not like fire, more like moonlight reflected in oil. But the true horror of the skriker isn't what you see, it's what it does. This creature doesn't just exist as a passive omen, it plays with you, haunts you, lures you off paths and into places you don't come back from. It can change form at will, sometimes appearing as a wounded animal, a lost child, or even a familiar face. It tricks the empathetic, it baits the curious, and once you're close enough to help, it shows you what it really is. Lancashire legends speak of people hearing the skriker's cry in the distance, then again closer, then again right beside them. But when they turn to look, there's nothing, just a coldness in the air, a thickness, the sense that something is waiting behind the nearest tree, breathing, watching, smiling maybe. This isn't just death's messenger, it's the harbinger of dread itself. The skriker doesn't simply show up before something bad happens. Sometimes it is the thing that happens. One tale from the forest of Boland describes a traveler who heard a scream in the trees and against every instinct followed it. They were found the next morning, shivering, unable to speak, with no memory of the night except something black with eyes too wide. Others say the skriker appears to grieving families before tragedy doubles back around, one misfortune followed by another. This creature sits at the crossroads of folklore and fear psychology. Some folklorists believe it's a personification of grief itself, a shape-shifting entity that reflects your worst memories back at you. But in the villages around Clitheroe and Blackburn, they don't talk like scholars. They talk like survivors. Don't follow the crying in the woods, they say. Don't answer if someone calls your name at night, and if you hear a dog cry like a child, walk the other way. Like many folkloric entities, the skriker can't quite be pinned down. In some versions, it's harmless if ignored. In others, it marks you forever. There's a sense of randomness to it, like lightning. Except with the skriker, it's not just about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's about listening when you should have stayed deaf. And if you do follow that scream through the tangled lanes of northern England, you might meet something worse than a phantom dog. You might meet something that looks like a horse or a mule or a man, but always with eyes that lead you off the road and into nowhere. That's the git rash. 5. Guy trash. If the skriker shrieks to drive you mad, the gay trash merely beckons, softly, subtly, deceptively. It doesn't chase, it doesn't roar, it just waits, watches, then walks ahead. And you follow. The Gitrash is one of northern England's most unnerving wanderers, a spectral figure that appears not in your dreams, but on your road, a traveler's ghost, a shapeshifter that haunts lonely lanes and woodland paths, especially those leading out of towns and into nowhere. Unlike the feral wildness of the skriker or the brooding silence of Padfoot, the Gitrash wears a cleverer mask. It doesn't need to terrify you, it just needs you to trust it. Originating from the folklore of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire, the Gitrash is usually described as a large animal, sometimes a black dog, sometimes a donkey or a mule, occasionally even a horned horse. Whatever the form, it always appears just ahead of the weary traveler, trotting slowly on the path as if guiding the way. But that path, it's rarely the one you meant to take. Imagine it.
You've been walking for hours through a twisting, unfamiliar country lane. The sun has dipped behind the hedgerows, and the wind carries no bird song. Then, just as you begin to wonder if you've strayed too far, a creature appears ahead, calm, steady, and unmistakably there. It looks back once, maybe twice, then moves forward again, and you, out of instinct, gratitude, or desperation, follow. That's when things get strange. Sometimes the path seems to stretch on forever. Landmarks vanish, the air grows colder, you feel like you're walking in circles, but you can't stop. And when the creature eventually disappears, when the Gitrash decides it's done with you, you're not where you thought you'd be. You're not even sure where you are. In some stories, the Gitrash leads travelers into bogs, in others to cliffs, in others still simply into exhaustion, trapped in loops until the mind starts to doubt what the eyes are seeing. But not all Gitrash encounters are malicious. Here's where it gets complicated. Unlike most other British black dog legends, the Gitrash has a dual nature. In some folk tales, it warns of danger ahead. In others, it guides lost souls to safety. It all depends on what form it takes. The black dog is often the ominous version, deceptive and dangerous, but the white Gitrash, or the one that appears in horse form, is sometimes seen as a guardian. This contradiction gives the legend its power. When you see the Gitrash, you don't know which version you're dealing with. You have to decide, and you won't know whether you were right until it's too late. Charlotte Bronte even slipped the Gitrash into Jane Eyre. When the protagonist first meets Mr. Rochester, his horse slips on ice and he falls. Jane had just seen what she thought was a large, dark dog preceding him on the road. She recalls old tales of the Gitrash and wonders whether she's crossed paths with something more than mortal. That moment, quiet, eerie, and loaded with tension, captures what makes the Gitrash such a potent piece of folklore. It's not the terror of being chased, it's the tension of not knowing whether you're being led or lured. Over time, tales of the Gitrash have faded in the popular mind, outpaced by more aggressive legends. But in rural corners of northern England, the story still flickers. Campers speak of a pale mule that passed silently between trees at twilight. Ramblers on the Pennonway whisper about a long-legged dog that seemed to float just beyond torchlight. And every so often, someone follows, because the Gitrash doesn't need to frighten you. It just needs you to take the next step. And if that step happens to be into a town like Bungay, where the past once split open under thunder and smoke, you might come face to face with a dog that doesn't lead or follow. It attacks. 6. Black Dog of Bungay. If the Gitrash is a whisper on the road, the Black Dog of Bungay is a scream that echoes through centuries. This is not a myth buried in old oral traditions. This one has dates, names, and burned-in evidence. The story of the Black Dog of Bungay is so vivid, so violent in its impact, that it carved itself into the stone walls and psyche of an entire town. It is not folklore that feels real. It is folklore that insists it already happened. The setting, Bungay, a quiet market town in Suffolk, England. The date, Sunday, August 4th, 1577. The weather, biblical. That morning, the sky cracked open over East Anglia. A fierce storm slammed the region with thunder, wind, and lightning so ferocious that even seasoned churchgoers hesitated. Still, services continued at St. Mary's Church. The building was sturdy. And besides, where better to wait out an apocalyptic downpour than inside a house of God? They had no idea what was coming through the door. At the height of the tempest, as lightning stitched the sky and rain battered the roof, a massive black dog burst into the church. Eyewitnesses said it was enormous, far larger than any earthly animal, with shaggy fur and eyes like burning coals. It didn't run. It didn't bark. It charged. Panic erupted. The congregation scattered, screams lost beneath the storm. The dog reportedly raced down the nave, killing two men, striking them down instantly before vanishing into the chaos, leaving behind a trail of sulfurous air and scorched stone. And here's where the legend becomes something more than hearsay. To this day, the ancient doors of St. Mary's Church bear long, charred gouges, deep marks that no ordinary dog could make. Locals call them the devil's fingerprints. These aren't hidden away in some dusty folklore book. You can walk into the church right now and see them. Run your fingers over the blackened wood. The marks are real, and they have never been fully explained. But Bungay wasn't the only town struck that day. 10 miles away, in the church at Blythburgh, worshippers experienced a nearly identical attack. Lightning crashed through the roof, stone pillars were shattered, and witnesses again claimed that a great black hound had thundered through the congregation. 3 people were left dead, others injured. In that church, too, claw marks remain, scored into the north door. Coincidence? Some say it was just an electrical storm. Others whisper darker theories that this was no simple black dog, that it was a manifestation, perhaps of the devil, perhaps of something older. One 16th century pamphlet described the beast as a thing of horrible shape and sight, sent by God as a judgment. Others saw it as a demon, summoned through heresy or sin. The local folk, they didn't try to label it, they just passed the story down and down and down. But perhaps the most terrifying part of the Black Dog of Bungay isn't the attack itself. It's the implication that this creature crossed space from Bungay to Blythburgh faster than any horse could ride, that it wasn't an animal at all, but a presence, an event, a tear in the world that opened, screamed, and shut before anyone could stop it. Even now, the legend refuses to die. The black dog has become a symbol of Bungay. Its silhouette appears on the town's sign, but not in a friendly mascot sort of way, more like a quiet warning, a memory that something did happen, something that left marks on wood, on stone, on history. And if you think the terror is confined to the countryside, think again, because deep in the belly of old London, another black dog waits, not in forests, not on moors, but in stone corridors slick with time, hunger, and desperation. The Black Dog of Newgate. 7. Black Dog of Newgate. If most phantom hounds roam the lonely wilds, fog-laced moors, wind-swept roads, haunted woods, this one waits behind iron bars. The Black Dog of Newgate doesn't pace churchyards or scratch at countryside doors. It haunts a prison, not just any prison, Newgate, the most infamous, soul-crushing hellhole of medieval London, a place where time meant nothing, hope had no value, and the line between man and monster got blurred long before any ghost arrived. To understand this dog, you have to understand the cage that birthed it. Newgate Prison was a grim landmark in the heart of the city, its stones soaked with centuries of suffering. Built in the 12th century and burned, rebuilt, and expanded across time, it was notorious for overcrowding, filth, and the kind of cruelty that historians often describe as unspeakable. But let's speak of it carefully. Conditions were harsh, food was scarce, justice was uneven, and when famine hit in the 13th century, desperation bled into something darker. That's when the legend takes root. The story goes like this. During a particularly brutal famine, the prison descended into chaos. Inmates starved by the dozens, and amid this despair, a scholar, wrongly imprisoned for sorcery, was thrown into the pit. Unlike the others, he had no allies, no connections. He barely had time to beg for mercy before the others turned on him. And when they were finished, they thought they were safe. They thought their crimes would go unanswered. But that night, a black dog appeared in the shadows of Newgate, massive, silent, glowing eyes and breath like frost. It stalked the prisoners one by one. Those responsible for the scholar's death tried to escape. They screamed. They clawed at the walls, but the dog came anyway, slipping between bars, appearing in corners no creature could fit through. It didn't just kill, it hunted, and when it was done, it didn't leave. The black dog of Newgate became part of the prison, a permanent fixture, a living curse. For centuries, guards and inmates alike told stories of a spectral hound that prowled the dark corridors. They claimed it could vanish into shadows or slip between locked cells. Some said it only appeared before executions. Others swore it visited the truly guilty, the ones even the law hadn't caught. Its appearance was always the same: eyes like burning coals, fur blacker than night, silence so loud it pressed on your chest. Some called it a demon. Others believed it was the restless soul of the scholar himself, returned in animal form. One legend even claims that the ghost dog wasn't just a spirit, but an idea, a fragment of rage so intense it grew teeth and refused to die. The black dog of Newgate didn't need open fields or moonlit trails. It had walls, chains, iron latches, and fear, the kind that never left, even after the cell doors opened. The prison is long gone now, demolished in the early 1900s, but the stories didn't
Vanish with the bricks. Visitors to the site, now the Old Bailey Courthouse, sometimes report cold spots, disembodied growls, the sudden irrational urge to look over their shoulder, and once in a while, rare but not rare enough, someone sees a large black dog standing where no dog should be, just watching, because even in the heart of a city, death needs a herald. And sometimes justice shows up long after the verdict. But step outside those walls, breathe the air of the ancient forests west of London. There's a different figure waiting there. Not a beast, but a man, or what's left of one, crowned with antlers, draped in shadow, chains clinking with the weight of old guilt and older magic. Herne the Hunter is calling.
7 creatures down, and we've already met death omens, chain-dragging hunters, and forest spirits that outlive empires. If you're still watching, you're one of us now. Hit subscribe to join the hunt through history's darkest corners and drop a comment. Where are you watching from and what time is it? Is it daylight where you are, or have the shadows started to move? We want to know who's brave enough to keep going.
8. Herne the Hunter Windsor Forest doesn't whisper. It moans, not with the rustle of leaves or the hoot of owls, but with the echoes of hooves that no longer strike earth, and the creak of branches that sway in time with chains. And somewhere among those ancient oaks, beneath a canopy so dense it drinks the moonlight, Herne the Hunter waits. He is not a beast, not quite, but not fully man either. Herne is a specter stitched together from old magic, royal guilt, and something more primal, something antlered, hunted, and hollow-eyed. He is England's ghost of the greenwood, draped in shadow, crowned in bone. His legend begins in the reign of King Richard II. The tale goes that Herne was a royal huntsman in the 14th century, a man who knew the forest better than anyone, so skilled, so connected to the woods that he could track a stag by the twitch of a single leaf. He was valued, trusted, until the day something changed. During a royal hunt, Herne was gored by a great white hart. Mortally wounded, he lay on the forest floor while the deer vanished into the trees. The king, unwilling to lose his best huntsman, called on a mysterious figure, perhaps a druid, perhaps something darker, to save him. The price, Herne's soul and his crown. He survived, but not unchanged. They say when Herne rose from his deathbed, antlers sprouted from his head. His manner darkened. He avoided others. The forest no longer welcomed him. It obeyed him. Trees bent when he passed. Animals grew quiet. Something about him had shifted, like he'd become a part of the woods he once commanded. But envy is a powerful thing, especially among men with power and pride. The other huntsmen, jealous of Herne's unnatural abilities and suspicious of the sorcery that saved him, conspired against him. Some say they framed him for theft. Others claim they simply turned the king against him. Either way, Hearn was dismissed in disgrace, shamed, cast out, and then one winter's morning, he was found hanging from a tree in the very woods he once ruled. But Hearn didn't stay dead. Soon after, strange sightings began. A figure, tall, gaunt, cloaked in shadow, was seen stalking the woods at night. Antlers gleaming against the sky, chains rattled at his side. Sometimes he rode a great black horse. Sometimes he walked alone. Always he watched. Always he returned. Over time, Hearn became more than a ghost. He became an omen. His appearances were said to coincide with national disaster, wars, royal crises, rebellions. He was spotted in the forest before the death of Charles I, again during the madness of George III, and even during the Blitz when bombs fell and Windsor shook. Some claim to hear hooves galloping through the forest, though no tracks were ever found. But Hearn is not a simple death harbinger. He is a spirit of transition, a reminder of power lost, of nature wronged, of loyalty betrayed. He represents the cost of unnatural bargains and the weight of vengeance
that grows heavier with time. To this day, locals speak in hushed tones about twilight walks where the birds go silent and the wind picks up without warning. Some believe Hearn rides only on stormy nights, his chains clinking like wind chimes made of regret. Others think he's always there, hidden behind bark and shadow, waiting for his moment to emerge. He is wild justice, feral consequence, the forest's memory made flesh. And as haunting as Hearn is, his face still bears the shape of a man. The next creature doesn't bother with that. It's older, faceless, and blooming with leaves. A figure carved into stone, perched above pub signs, peering from church walls with a grin of ivy. The Green Man is watching.
9. The Green Man. He watches from walls, smiles from stone, and waits in wood, not behind trees, but as them, not in shadow, but in the light that filters through leaves like stained glass. You've seen him, even if you didn't know it. The Green Man, face of foliage, eyes of silence, stares out from ancient churches, medieval abbeys, forgotten bridges, and cozy English pubs. He's everywhere, but no one knows who he is, or was, or might still be. And maybe that's the point. The Green Man is not a hound, nor a wraith, nor a thing that skitters in the dark. He is older, quieter, stranger, a myth that grew from the roots of pre-Christian England and never quite left. Even as the churches went up and the gods came down, he appears in carvings, hundreds of them, hidden in plain sight across Britain. His face is human, but made of leaves. Vines twist through his beard. Flowers bloom from his mouth. Acorns sprout from his eyes. Sometimes he's serene, sometimes smirking, sometimes screaming, but always he grows. Historians will tell you that the Green Man is a symbol of rebirth, that he's the spirit of nature's endless cycle, life, death, decay, bloom. A pagan remnant swallowed by Christianity, repurposed into decoration, and quietly tolerated across cathedrals and cloisters. But folklore doesn't end with footnotes, and the Green Man is far more than decorative moss. In older, darker versions of the tale, he's not just the embodiment of spring, he's the cost of it, the thing that bleeds so the harvest can come, the one who dies each winter and claws his way back in the thaw. He's not just nature, he's nature's will. There are whispers that he demands offerings, not in gold or praise, but in respect. Disrespect the land, the woods, the balance, and things go wrong. Livestock perish, crops rot, children vanish into the trees and return different, if they return at all. And sometimes the Green Man is said to walk, Not in the modern age, of course, not where cars and CCTV rule, but in the old villages, in the places where the hedge still hems the road and the trees still murmur in dialects older than English. There, people tell stories of a tall figure wrapped in bark and bramble with eyes like polished holly leaves. He appears just at the edge of vision, watching, rooted, waiting. It's no coincidence that many May Day festivals once featured the crowning of a green man, a costumed figure paraded through town before being symbolically killed or buried. The land demanded the ritual, the people obeyed. Then came the harvest. In some versions of the myth, the green man is not alone. He is consort to the Earth Mother, opponent to the Holly King, a brother to the oak, a shadow of the wild hunt. The folklore web around him is thick and tangled, growing in every direction like the ivy from his lips. And still he smiles because his power is in permanence. He doesn't need believers, just seasons. He endures in art,
In stone, in moss. He is the smile of something that knows it will outlast you. So next time you pass an old chapel and see a leafy face watching from the eaves, nod just to be safe, but don't get too comfortable, because from here we travel to the far southwest, where the land narrows into moor and myth, a place of granite tors and sea-slick cliffs. There the little folk are not content to be carvings. They dance, they laugh, and they lead you astray. Welcome to Pixie Country.
10. Piskies, pixies, step lightly on Dartmoor, mind the mists, and if you ever hear laughter on the wind, high, tinkling, and just out of reach, don't follow it, because in the furthest reaches of Cornwall and Devon, the little folk don't need to haunt you. They confuse you. These are the piskies or pixies, depending on your accent, your village, or how badly you've already been tricked. They are England's most misbehaving myth. Small, clever, and chaotic, these creatures aren't your sanitized storybook sprites. They don't grant wishes, they don't sing in harmony, and they don't help you unless it suits them. No, pixies play. And their game? Getting you lost. The moors of southwest England are ancient, rippled with granite outcrops, fog-slicked trails, and valleys so quiet you can hear your own nerves. In this wild terrain, piskies are said to roam freely, often invisible, but sometimes seen as tiny, green-clad figures with wild hair and wide grins. They're not malevolent exactly, but they are dangerous in their indifference. You could be walking a well-marked path in broad daylight, and suddenly nothing makes sense. The trees look wrong. The stones aren't where you remember. The trail vanishes, and in the distance, laughter. Not loud, just light, teasing, as if someone finds your panic very amusing. That's called being pixie-led. It's an actual term in Devonian folklore, a real affliction, at least if you ask the locals. Being pixie-led isn't about being physically lost. It's mental, disoriented. You forget where you are, why you came, what direction is home. Some say your compass spins. Others say even the stars look unfamiliar. You might walk in circles for hours or days until finally, for no reason you can explain, the fog lifts and you're standing right back where you started. No harm done, just a little shaken, and now a believer. But don't mistake their pranks for harmless fun. Piskies can turn sour, especially if mocked, dismissed, or insulted. In stories, those who scoff at the pixie tales, or worse, destroy their favorite haunts, tend to find their milk soured, their tools broken, or their hair tied in knots while they sleep. The message is clear. You don't have to fear them, but you do have to respect them. There are countless local stories passed down through rural Devon and Cornwall. A farmer who couldn't find his front door for a week. A traveler led in circles around a single standing stone until he offered a coin and begged forgiveness. A child who vanished on the moor, only to reappear unharmed with a dazed look and strange flowers in her pocket. flowers no one could identify. The only known remedy for being pixie-led, turning your clothes inside out. It breaks the charm, supposedly, a small act of chaos to confuse the tricksters, or maybe just a way to make them laugh with you instead of at you. Piskies aren't confined to moors either. In some tales, they live in barrows, ancient ruins, or even household nooks. Like mischievous house spirits, they might steal small objects, tangle threads, or knock things from shelves, especially if they think you've stopped believing in them. Their image over time has been softened. Tourists find them cute. Local shops sell pixie statues and tea towels, but scratch the surface and the old stories remain. Wild-eyed, earthbound, and utterly unpredictable, because pixies are older than whimsy. They're tricksters from a time when the woods had rules, and breaking them meant someone noticed. And if you think these tiny chaos makers are bad, wait until you go underground, into the mines where things don't just disappear. They tap, they knock, and sometimes they warn you just in time. Next stop, the knockers. 11. Knockers down. In the dark, where the air is heavy and the stone sweats, you hear it. Tap, tap, tap. Not loud, not urgent, just there. Steady, distant, and impossible to ignore. It echoes through the narrow shafts of Cornwall's old tin mines like a heartbeat beneath the rock. The miners knew what it meant, or at least they believed they did. They called them the knockers. To the uninitiated, it might sound absurd. Ghosts in the mines, little creatures with picks and lanterns. But to generations of Cornish miners, the knockers were no joke. They were taken as seriously as cave-ins, gas leaks, and bad luck. And in a place where the difference between life and death could come down to a few inches of timber, miners trusted what the stone told them, and sometimes what it tapped. The knockers were believed to be small, gnome-like beings who dwelled deep underground, just beyond the reach of candlelight. Some described them as wizened and gray-skinned, with oversized heads and long arms for digging. Others said they looked like tiny, sooty miners themselves, complete with tools, lanterns, and grimy clothes. But no matter the form, one detail always remained. You heard them before you ever saw them. Their signature was the knocking, strange, rhythmic taps on the rock. Sometimes it meant danger, unstable ceilings, flooding, or a pocket of gas waiting to explode. Other times it meant gold or tin or silver. The sound of the knockers could lead a man to his fortune or save him from an early grave. But here's the trick. The knockers didn't always want to help. They were tricksters by nature. If they liked you, they might guide you to a rich vein of ore with their taps, or warn you away from a collapsing shaft. But if you disrespected them, laughed at the stories, stole offerings, or cursed the mine, they might turn nasty, hide your tools, lead you in circles, or worse, stay silent when you most needed a warning. That's why miners left offerings, scraps of pasties, crusts of bread, bits of meat or cheese, tiny meals tucked into dark corners of the mine as a sign of respect. You fed the knockers, they fed your luck. It was that simple. And if you skipped the ritual, well, tap, 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 silence. Folklorists have traced the knockers back to pre-Christian beliefs in underground spirits, guardians of hidden wealth and forgotten places. When Cornish miners emigrated to the United States in the 19th century, they brought the legend with them. In the gold mines of California and Nevada, American miners started hearing stories of Tommyknockers. The name changed, but the rhythm stayed the same. Even now, long after most of Cornwall's mines have fallen silent, the stories persist. Explorers and historians who wander into the old shafts sometimes report hearing strange noises, tapping, knocking, even laughter, echoes that shouldn't be there, drafts where there should be stillness. The sense of being watched, not by ghosts, but by
something else, something ancient, something annoyed, One tale tells of a mine in St. Just where the knockers supposedly guided a trapped man to a hidden tunnel when all seemed lost. Another recounts a greedy overseer who mocked the legends until his lantern went out and he vanished without a trace, save for the sound of muffled knocking beneath the rock. The knockers don't seek revenge, they seek balance. You give a little, they give back. Break that deal and you're digging blind. And once you've accepted that little things live in the dark and speak through stone, it's not much of a leap to imagine other small creatures lurking in the ruins above. Not kind, not helpful. These ones guard their treasure like dragons and grow 10 feet tall when angry. They're called spriggans.
12. Spriggans. If pixies are the pranksters of the moor and knockers the whisperers in the dark, then spriggans are the enforcers, the ones who show up when laughter turns to threat. They are Cornwall's most vengeful little folk, twisted shadows of the playful piskies and the helpful knockers, and while they may be small when you meet them, never forget this, they don't stay small. Spriggans are ruin haunters, graveyard squatters, ancient guardians of places no one visits unless they have to, and even then, only in daylight. They dwell in the remains of Iron Age forts, weather-beaten barrows, or broken stone rings overrun with weeds. When the walls crumble and the moss takes over, the Spriggans move in, making the ruins their throne rooms, and heaven help the one who trespasses. Descriptions of them vary, but the core remains: gnarled faces, sharp eyes, bent backs, twisted limbs. Their bodies look like they were carved from roots and baked in the sun too long. Some accounts claim they wear tattered rags, others say armor of bone and thorn, but all agree their expressions are never kind. Spriggans look at you like they're sizing up what you're worth and what they'd get if they took it, because that's what Spriggans do. They take. They're treasure guardians, yes, but not in the X marks the spot sort of way. More like cursed hoards buried under standing stones or forgotten trinkets in tombs. They don't hoard gold because it shines. They hoard it because it's theirs. And if you even think about digging in a place they claim, if you so much as touch the wrong rock, they'll know. And then comes the swelling. One of the oldest parts of Spriggan lore is their ability to grow. A creature no larger than a child can suddenly loom 10 feet high, a hulking brute of stone and storm, its body warping as fast as your courage drains. It doesn't roar, it doesn't speak, it just comes for you. They are said to control weather too, sudden gusts of wind, hailstones from a clear sky, fog that drops like a curtain in seconds. These aren't mere tricks, they're warnings. The Spriggans don't want to negotiate, they want you gone. And they don't just guard old treasure, they guard the border between the living and the dead. In many Cornish tales, Spriggans are described as the souls of ancient giants, now bound to earth in smaller forms. Others say they're the dead themselves, cursed or unwilling to rest. That's why they haunt graveyards and barrows. That's why they're never far from a stone you shouldn't touch. One chilling tale tells of a farmer who found an old ring of standing stones near Bodmin Moor. He claimed a strange little man warned him to leave it alone. He didn't listen. The next day, his livestock fled, his tools rusted overnight, and his child, healthy and strong the day before, fell into a silent sleep that lasted until the full moon. When the boy awoke, he spoke of giant faces watching him and voices underground calling out in rhyme. That's another Spriggan trait. They speak in riddles, but only when they want to. Most of the time, they stay silent, watching, waiting until someone makes the wrong move. You can still find Spriggan holes marked on old Cornish maps, rocky crevices or ringed ruins that older generations simply refuse to disturb. In some places, it's still common practice to leave a shiny object behind when passing near one, a coin, a button, a ring, not because it's owed, but because it's weird, because sometimes the land itself has rules, and the spriggans are the enforcers. But if the spriggans guard what's buried in the earth, the next creature rules what crashes against its edges. A sea spirit, salty and furious, that storms in on the waves and leaves behind broken nets and broken promises. The bucka is coming. 13. Buka. The sea is not your friend. It never was. In Cornwall, that truth was never just poetic. It was practical, primal, and personal. The ocean giveth, yes, but it also taketh with salt-stained hands. And when it did, the locals knew who to blame. They called it Bucka, not a single being, but a shifting spirit of the sea, sometimes singular, sometimes plural, sometimes feared, sometimes revered, and always present. Bucka was the unseen force behind sudden storms, tangled nets, lost boats, and unexpected bounty, a creature of wind and wave, spray and shadow, the sea's own mood, given voice. You'll find two main faces of the Bucka in Cornish folklore. There's Bucka Du, the dark Bucka, black as a storm cloud, moody, hungry, vengeful. And then there's Bucka Gwydden or Bucka Widden, the white Bucka, gentler, sometimes helpful, a fair weather spirit, but the line between the two, thin as a tide mark, and just as easy to cross without noticing. The Bucka was believed to dwell in caves along the rocky coastline, especially those near fishing villages like Newlyn, Mousehole, and Porthcurno, caves that filled with crashing waves at high tide and sang with hollow wind when the sea drew back. You didn't see Buka, you heard it, felt it, smelled the brine in the air before the storm hit, and knew something had been stirred. And so the fishermen left offerings. Every night before sailing out, they dropped bits of fish, crusts of bread, or even coins near the rocks, small sacrifices to appease the Buka, to ask for fair winds, a good catch, a safe return. It wasn't superstition, it was survival. If someone forgot, or worse, mocked the practice, that's when the weather changed. That's when oars snapped in calm seas and nets came up too heavy, or worse, empty for weeks. The Bucka didn't punish with flair. It punished with slow dread, the slow drain of luck, the long silence of fishless days. But Buka wasn't always wrathful. Some stories speak of the Buka appearing as a figure on the shore during storms, guiding sailors to safety, a shape-shifting presence, sometimes a shadowy man, sometimes a seal-like creature, sometimes just a glint of eyes above the waves. It wasn't a demon, it wasn't a god, it was something else, something that didn't need to care about you, but sometimes did. Miners, too, had their own version of the Bucka. In Cornish tin mines near the coast, workers spoke of sea spirits who would knock, moan, or whisper through the tunnels. Some believed the mine and the sea were connected, echoing each other's moods. A collapsed tunnel could be the Bucka's displeasure. A sudden rich vein, its rare approval. Even the weather was blamed on it. A fierce wind out of nowhere, the Bucka dancing, rain that wouldn't stop, the Bucka's grief. Whole villages would nod solemnly when a boat went missing and say, Bucka's taken his due, not with malice, just with inevitability. And then there's the tale of the Buka's origin. Some say it was once a god, perhaps a local sea deity whose name was lost, but whose presence lingered. Others claim it was a cursed fisherman, transformed into a spirit to wander the waves forever. One version insists Buka was once a mermaid's child, cast out for being too human, but the truth, as always, is that no one knows, because Buka isn't just a creature, it's Cornwall's memory of the sea, personified. The ocean was never just water, it had moods, and those moods had names. Even today, locals still nod to the old legends, a bit of food tossed into the surf, a quiet word on the harbor wall, not out of fear necessarily, but out of respect, because the bee listens, and sometimes it answers, and if it ever answers with something too large, too wet, and far too long to be a wave, then it might not be a spirit at all. It might be Morgawr. 14. Morgower doesn't live in the past. It lives in the bay. Now, that's what makes it different. It's not a medieval footnote or a footpath whisper. Morgower swims today in the cold waters off Cornwall's southern coast, particularly around Falmouth Bay. The name means sea giant in Cornish, and it fits. Morgower isn't a dainty mer creature or a shimmering fantasy. It's described as massive, long-necked, hump-backed, and coated in kelp-drenched skin, like someone took a plesiosaur and dunked it in seaweed and salt, then dared it to never die. The first official sighting, or at least the first that stirred headlines, came in 1975. A woman named Mary F., out for a quiet walk along the cliffs near Pendennis Point, spotted something breaching the surface of the water. She described a creature with a long, snake-like neck, moving through the water in a slow, steady undulation. No splashing, no flailing, just calm, deliberate motion, like it knew it was being watched and didn't care. She reported it. The papers picked it up, and suddenly Cornwall had its own Loch Ness monster. But the locals had already known. Long before Mary, fishermen had told stories of something huge and shadowy in the bay, something that scared off fish, broke nets, and sometimes followed boats just a little too long. They never gave it a name, they just called it the thing. Once Morgar was named, it began appearing everywhere. Photographs followed, some grainy, some ridiculous, some disturbingly convincing. In one, a hump rises from the waves like a submarine wearing camouflage. In another, a long neck juts from the water with a head too angular to be a seal, too smooth to be a bird, and too real to be comfortable. The skeptics scoffed, of course. Driftwood, they said, a cormorant mid-dive, a hoax. And to be fair, Cornwall has hoaxed before. A satirical writer once admitted to planting fake stories under the pseudonym Doc Shields to stir the pot. But then the other stories came in. A trawler crew in the 1980s reported something massive swimming under their vessel. The sonar lit up like a Christmas tree. No known species matched the shape. A Navy diver, training in the same waters, surfaced pale and shaking, refusing to talk about what he'd seen. And then there were the tourists, dozens of them, snapping photos from cliff path, capturing something just on the edge of frame. Not proof, but something. What makes Morgar so compelling isn't just the sightings, it's the setting. Falmouth Bay is deep, unfathomably so in places. The waters are cold, murky, and layered with ancient wrecks. Roman galleys, Viking ships, U-boats, and even World War II aircraft rest at the bottom. It's a place where time sinks and never comes back up. Perfect, in other words, for a creature that shouldn't exist. But might and Morgar isn't just there, it's territorial. Some claim boats that drift too close to its hunting ground are suddenly rocked by invisible waves. Divers report strange underwater sounds, booms, groans, and pulses too rhythmic to be geological. Even seals, usually playful and abundant, avoid certain coves when Morgar is active. The name may be recent, but the idea is old. Sea serpents have haunted Cornwall's coast for centuries. The Celts had tales of water worms. Smugglers in the 18th century spoke of long shadows that chased the tide. And even today, fishermen will occasionally return to shore pale, shaking their heads and saying only, "She's out there again." Some believe Morgar is the last of a species, an ancient marine reptile that somehow survived extinction. Others say it's not one creature, but many, a breeding population hidden in underwater caves, feeding on fish and folklore alike. And if Morgower is real, it isn't just watching from the water, because not far from Falmouth Bay, in the woods near a quiet Cornish church, something else with wings and red eyes has taken up residence. Not a sea serpent, not a dog, but a man, or maybe a bird, or maybe both. They call it the owlman. 15. Owlman of Monon. It began near a church because of course it did. St. Monin and St. Stephen's Church sits perched above the Helford River in Cornwall, flanked by dark trees and too much silence. It's the kind of place that makes you look over your shoulder without knowing why. That quiet, it isn't peaceful, it's loaded, charged. The locals always knew the woods were strange, but it wasn't until the 1970s that something came out of them. It had wings, it had claws, and it had eyes, red, unblinking, and burning with the kind of stare that makes children cry. They call it the Owlman of Monin. The first reported sighting was in April 1976. Two young girls on holiday with their family were playing near the churchyard when they saw what they thought was a large bird roosting in a tree, until it moved, stood upright, spread its wings, wings wider than a man is tall, and let out a screech that shook the branches. They described it as part owl, part man, with gray feathers and piercing red eyes. It flew straight up into the air and vanished into the woods. They ran. Who wouldn't? And then it happened again. In July of the same year, two more girls reported the same thing near the very same church. Massive wings, glowing eyes, the sudden swoop and silence of something too large and too fast. Their descriptions matched perfectly. Local researcher Tony Doc Shields, already known for his interest in British monsters and folklore, documented the events and even claimed to have seen the owlman himself. His involvement, however, cast a shadow over the sightings, leading some skeptics to cry hoax. But the story didn't die. Reports trickled in over the years, always the same area, always the same description: a tall, humanoid figure covered in feathers, sometimes seen gliding between trees, other times perched atop the church tower like a gargoyle come to life. Witnesses often described the same sensation, an overwhelming sense of being watched, followed by the appearance of the creature, and then nothing but terror. And here's what makes the Owlman more than just Cornwall's cryptid of the month: the timing. The 1970s were the heyday of paranormal hysteria. UFOs, ghosts, and cryptids were exploding in popular culture, but most of those stories came from across the pond: big skies and bigger myths. The Owlman, however, was ours, England's answer to the Mothman, and unlike many folk creatures who trace their roots back centuries, this one was brand new, a modern myth in the making. But maybe it wasn't so new after all. Cornwall has always been a landscape of transformation, of gods and giants, of spirits that blend animal and human in uncomfortable proportions. Some folklorists suggest the owlman is simply a rebirth of older myths, perhaps a form of the shape-shifting bucka, or a corrupted nature spirit like a rogue pixie that grew wings instead of a conscience. Others think it's a tulpa, an idea brought to life through belief and repetition, a creature born from local anxiety, given feathers and eyes through stories and sightings that reinforce one another. Still others propose more grounded theories: a misidentified barn owl, perhaps, or an escaped exotic pet. But none of those explain the way people feel after they see it. Witnesses describe nausea, disorientation, the sense that time moves strangely during the encounter. One woman in 95 claimed she saw the owlman watching her from the churchyard wall, and when she blinked, it was gone. But she had no memory of the following hour. Today, people still visit the site. Some bring EMF readers, others bring cameras, some leave offerings, small trinkets, feathers, coins, placed quietly on the church steps, just in case it's real, just in case it's still watching. And from this red-eyed terror of the skies, we now descend, literally, into the wild heart of Cornwall's most haunted moor, where something feline stalks under cloud and fog. It's not a ghost, it's not a fairy, it's teeth, muscle, shadow, the beast of Bodmin Moor.
16. Beast of Bodmin Moor. Some legends lurk in the past. Others pad through the present The beast of Bodmin Moor is one of those creatures that refuses to stay buried in folklore. It prowls through headlines and police reports just as easily as it does through the bracken and mist of Cornwall's most mysterious stretch of wilderness. It's not ancient, not carved in church woodwork or whispered about by medieval monks. It didn't come from the sea or the sky. It came from the fog, from the field, from somewhere in between what we know and what we'd really rather not find in the dark. The first flurry of sightings started in the early 1980s, but reports of something big, black, and feline haunting the hills and heather of Bodmin Moor go back further. The pattern was always the same: a flash of movement in the underbrush, a pair of yellow eyes and a flashlight beam, livestock found dead, mauled in ways that didn't match foxes or dogs. There were no footprints, no tracks, and often no explanations, and yet the beast kept showing up. Witnesses described a large black cat, far too large to be domestic. Not quite panther, not quite leopard, but definitely feline, muscular, low to the ground, moving with that unmistakable liquid grace predators have when they're not in a hurry because they don't have to be. Sheep carcasses turned up more frequently, especially around the edges of farms that bordered the moor. Cattle, too. In some cases, the damage was so severe and so surgical that local farmers refused to chalk it up to local wildlife. One even claimed to have seen the creature crouched over a kill, eyes glowing in the headlights, before it turned and melted into the bracken. Then came the blurry photographs, classic cryptid energy, smudged shapes on film, grainy silhouettes at dawn, and one infamous image of what might have been a large black cat standing on a dry stone wall. Might is doing the heavy lifting there, but it was enough. Enough to get national news involved, enough to prompt questions in Parliament, enough to warrant a formal government investigation. Yes, in 95, the UK government actually commissioned a report on the beast of Bodmin Moor. The conclusion? Officially, there was no verifiable evidence of a big cat living on the moor. Unofficially, that's not what everyone believed. There were rumors, persistent ones, that exotic cats had been released into the wild after the Dangerous Wild Animals Act of 1976 made it illegal to keep certain species without a license. Privately owned panthers, pumas, or lynx might have been turned loose rather than turned over. Cornwall's wide open spaces and light population density would have made the moor a perfect hiding place. And once a creature like that settles into a food chain, it doesn't advertise. But the beast of Bodmin isn't just a potential puma with an impressive sense of direction. It's taken on a mythic quality now. It lives in the same mental space as the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. More than an animal, less than a ghost, a symbol of the wildness that still breathes just beyond the edge of the mapped world. People still report sightings. Hikers hear growls they can't explain. Dogs come back from walks skittish, tails between their legs. Locals trade stories in pubs, stories that all end the same way. I know what I saw. Even today, the beast remains a sort of unofficial guardian of the moor, a test of nerve for the curious and the skeptical alike. Would you walk alone at dusk across those lonely hills, knowing something might be watching you from the gorse, something that doesn't need to be seen to be real? And if you think Bodmin's cryptid claws are bad, just wait until you go home, because sometimes the monsters don't live in the woods. Sometimes they live in your house. Next up, boggarts.
17. Boggarts. Some creatures wait outside. Boggarts don't. They come inside, into the rafters, the floorboards, the space beneath the bed, into your kitchen, into your dreams. They don't haunt the wilderness. They haunt you. If you're imagining some cozy little house elf who just wants to dust the fireplace and share biscuits, forget it. A boggart is what happens when helpful household spirits go rogue, and once they do, there's no going back. Not for them, and not for you. Let's rewind. In the older days, before central heating and sensible wallpaper, it was common for homes, particularly in the north of England, to be shared with things that weren't quite human. These spirits went by many names: Hob, Brownie, Lubberfiend, and they helped around the house, quietly, at night, as long as you respected them. That meant no gifts, no praise, no mocking. You left out a bowl of milk, maybe some crumbs. You didn't thank them. You didn't see them. You just let them be. But if someone slipped up, if someone gave the hobclothes a massive insult in spirit etiquette or mocked its presence, something changed. The air grew colder. Things began to go missing. And that quiet, invisible helper, it became a boggart. The word itself is slippery. In Lancashire and the North, a boggart might mean any kind of mischievous or malicious spirit, but in its purest form, a boggart is a corrupted house spirit, the kind that doesn't just make noise, it makes your life unravel. Milk turns sour overnight, bread molds before it bakes, doors slam on their own, footsteps creep overhead when no one's upstairs. You set down your keys, blink, and they're gone, only to reappear in the oven or the well. Threads tangle, books vanish, rooms grow inexplicably cold, and the worst part, no one believes you. That's part of the curse. You sound mad. It's just bad luck, they say, or you must have misplaced it. Meanwhile, you know something is watching, something angry, not dramatic, not deadly, just slowly wearing you down, day by day, drip by drip. Some families, once boggart struck, were said to be unable to shake the thing. They moved house only for the boggart to follow. This became so common that the saying arose, "You can't shift a boggart by shifting house," because once it's attached to you, it doesn't care about addresses. And boggarts aren't just house pests, they can infect farms too, scaring livestock, curdling milk in the pail, undoing plow work overnight. In some places, the land was considered boggart blasted, meaning nothing would grow there and no one could stay for long. The truly unlucky said their boggart spoke, not in words, but in murmurs, laughs, the occasional snarl. One tale tells of a family near Rochdale who heard their boggart muttering their names at night. It never finished the list. But not all boggarts are invisible. Some, according to folklore, take shape, gnarled and squat, covered in matted hair or old rags with long fingers perfect for snatching and scratching. They might sit in the corner of the room, silent, smiling, or stand just behind the door, always too still, always too real. Despite their menace, boggarts were never the stars of ghost stories. They were the background dread, the slow horror, the spirit you inherited like bad debt. They weren't flashy, they were persistent, insidious, personal, and they still show up today, just under new names. That bump in the attic, the lights that flicker for no reason, that thing that keeps misplacing your phone in the fridge. Some say those are just technical glitches or memory lapses. Others say you've got a boggart, and if you're lucky, it'll just mess with your butter, because the next creature, it starts friendly, helpful even, until you make one small mistake, and the kindness curdles into something you can't uninvite. Meet the Hobbs. 18. Hobbs. They begin as friends. That's the unsettling part. Hobbs are not born in malice. They aren't monsters waiting to strike or curses tied to grave dirt. They're helpers, warm, useful, silent presences that move unseen through the corners of your life until they don't. Found primarily in North Yorkshire and scattered across the moorland folklore like breadcrumbs, Hobbs are one of the oldest, most persistent types of household spirits in English tradition. Not quite goblins, not quite fairies, definitely not human. They're close, but off just enough to make your skin crawl once you know what they are. A hob might live under your hearthstone, or behind the pantry, or inside the dry wall of your barn. You don't see them, not unless they want to be seen, but you know they're there. You go to bed after a long day's work. The next morning,
The fire's already lit. The floor's been swept. The butter's been churned. That tool you couldn't find is back in its place. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, just done. Quiet miracles in a hard world. The locals never asked questions. They just left a bit of bread and milk near the hearth and said thank you without speaking it aloud. And in return, the hob stayed kind. It's a simple bargain, really. Don't disturb, don't disrespect, and don't get clever, because the moment you break that agreement, the hob breaks too. The most common mistake? Giving it clothes. It sounds generous. Thank you for all your work. Here's a nice jacket. But to a hob, this is humiliation. A reminder that it's not part of the household, not truly accepted. It's being paid off, bought, and they hate it. The second mistake? Naming them. Hobs are private creatures. Personal. Once you try to label them, define them, talk about them like they're yours, the spell shatters. You've turned respect into possession. And hobs do not take kindly to ownership. A once helpful hob, scorned, becomes a mischief engine. Milk goes sour, roof tiles fall in calm weather, tools vanish permanently. And the worst part? They never attack directly. They just slowly erode your world, like rust with a sense of humor. There's a story from Gothland about the Hob of Hob Hole, a cave dwelling spirit near the coast. He was known to help fishermen and farmers alike, especially if they left food at the cave's mouth. But one spring, a stranger scoffed at the tradition, tossed the food aside, and declared the whole thing nonsense. The next day, his cart flipped. His oxen refused to move. The sea churned despite calm skies. Eventually, he made amends, returning to the cave with a bowed head and an apology whispered into the dark. The hob forgave him, maybe. And that's the thing. Hobs aren't evil. They're principled. They operate on a logic older than law, a kind of quiet contract between human and not quite human, a mutual respect based on need and boundaries. Break that and you pay, but keep it and
You've got the best housemaid in Yorkshire. The nature of the hob reflects something deeper in folklore, the idea that the supernatural isn't always grand or cataclysmic. Sometimes it's close, domestic, a part of the architecture. It lives in the lintel and the smoke, and it's only terrifying when we forget it's real. So the next time your boots are mysteriously clean or your chores feel oddly light, leave a bit of bread behind just in case, because losing a hob is bad enough. But making one angry, that's how you end up with something worse, something that doesn't help you, but laughs at you loudly, gleefully. And just when you think you're the hero of the story, it makes you the punchline. Here comes the Headley cow. 19. Headley cow. If you live in Northumberland or anywhere near its lonely moors and old heather lanes, you might have grown up with a warning. Never trust a form that shifts in the dusk, because sometimes what looks harmless wants to hurt you in the long run. That's Headley Cow. He's one of England's oldest tricksters, a shape-shifting sprite who delights in turning pride into peril, certainty into confusion, and confidence into embarrassment. Not cruel in the way a monstrous creature is, though don't push it. Headley Cow prefers irony, a prank that comes with a grin after the fact. His legend stretches back centuries. Rural folk still tell his tales as both entertainment and caution. Typically, Headley Cow appears to travelers as something small and innocuous, a shiny object glinting by the road, a lost child's hand, a small animal in distress. You stop, you approach, you reach, and then he changes. That pebble, now a snake. That puppy, a snarling feral cat. That stray coin, a handful of dust. The trick is anticipation. He leads you to believe he's needy. He stirs your empathy. Then, when you least expect it, he morphs, laughs, and disappears into mist, or reverts to something that looks like nothing at all. One story tells of a young farmhand walking home after dusk along a forest edge.
He spotted something flickering beside the path and bent to pick it up. The next instant, it twisted into a viper that slithered into a patch of fog. The boy jumped back, heart pounding, only to realize that nothing was there. His reward? A laughter echoing off the trees, like someone saying, "Got you." In another version, a woman gave a coin to a small, ragged child at a verge, only to have it vanish. The child turned into an animal, small, dark, flickering, and bounded off. She chased it until she realized the path had changed. She was lost. It took her hours to return to her own door. Headley Cow is not out to kill. His delight is confusion, embarrassment, the breakdown of certainty. He shows up at twilight, not long after your defenses are low, and invites you to step off your narrative. And many do. In some tales, if you follow him into the woods, you end up far from home. Doors lock behind you, paths vanish, your own boots feel heavier. But if you return politely or show humility, sometimes he grants a small boon, guidance back, a glimmering insight, or a warning whispered in your ears. He's a spirit of humility. Tales about him often come with explicit morals. Don't be too proud. Don't assume the world bends to your will. Every glint is not a gift. Every plea isn't real. In folklore communities, parents told these stories to humble braggarts, to keep farmhands from boasting that nothing surprises me. Some folklorists argue he's part of a whole family of shapeshifters in northern folk belief, with roots in ancient Germanic tricksters and Celtic nature spirits. His name may derive from Headley, the place, and cow, a dialect word meaning cow, though in context more like creature. In any case, he's locally beloved in mischief, and he remains relevant. Even now, a hiker in Northumberland might swear they saw something small along the roadside, something shining, moving, only to turn and find nothing but mist. Or their boot might catch on a root, as if something unseen lured them off the path. These are the modern traces of a very old spirit. He's welcome around farms and lanes as long as you remember humility. Don't reach too fast. Don't assume. Nod perhaps. Show respect. And even then, expect a chuckle. And after you've been pranked, the landscape whispers again. Shadows lengthen. The hearth seems quieter, and your own sense of certainty unravels a little, which is exactly when Black Annis enters the scene, because where tricksters play, the hags lurk. 20. Black Annis. Not all women of myth are kind. Some loom in caves and wait. In Leicestershire's Dane Hills, carved in local legend, resides a sinister presence older than many stories. Black Annis is not a spirit who teases, she forbids. She isn't a trickster. She is vindictive, a creature of the abyss and the bone. Descriptions of Black Annis vary, but the consistent images are chilling. She is said to have skin the color of woad or cold slate, dark, mottled, almost bark-like. Her eyes glow faintly. Her fingers are long, with iron claws curved like scythes. Her mouth is wide. Her tongue, sometimes described as blue, flicks with cruelty. And if she's in her cave at night, she is rarely heard. She watches, waits. Her domain is the caves in the Dane Hills, in the southwestern corner of Leicestershire. A cave called Black Annis's Bower was pointed out in local tradition, rugged, overgrown, uninviting. The locals said that after nightfall, she roamed the hills, emerging to hunt among the cottages that bordered the woodland. Children's stories warned, if you're out after dark, you'd better be home by curfew, or Black Annis would take you. She might snatch you in the shadows, drag you off into the woods, and keep you in her cave. Some versions soften this by saying she eats only the bones, leaving the victims lifeless husks. Others say she stores youthful flesh in her cave, taking only what she needs. Either way, she's a predator of the vulnerable. Farmers claimed that lambing season was especially dangerous. Newborn animals were vulnerable to her hunts. Some shepherds reported finding lambs slaughtered with surgical precision and bones stripped clean, too clean for foxes or wild dogs. They swore Black Annis was responsible, but context matters. These stories emerged in a time when child mortality was high and wild animals killed unwanted livestock often. Villages needed cautionary monsters to keep nighttime wanderers in line, and Black Annis fit that role perfectly. She warned, "Don't wander, stay close, be careful." Later ballads and folk tales expanded her legend. Some say she can change shape into a fox, a wolf, or a fading wraith and slip through hedgerows. Some say her claws can shred doors or tear stone. Some say her threats were whispered in the wind. Yet, despite or because of her horror, local tradition treated her name with caution. People avoided saying Black Annis aloud after dark. Mothers hushed spoke her name. Folk charms and warding marks, cross signs, iron nails, running water were used around barns, homes, and birthing rooms to keep her out. Some modern occultists and folklorists interpret her as a remnant of ancient earth cult hags, gods of death, and the underworld who linger in the margins as monstrous echoes. In that reading, she is less a witch figure and more a dark spiral in the psyche of the land. The fear of the night, the cost of innocence, the boundary between human and feral. In the
Present day, Black Annis isn't much reported. Few would claim to see her creeping in Dane Hills, but the legend survives. Walkers near those hills sometimes speak of unnatural cold patches, unsettling silence in woods that should hum at dusk, the sense of being watched from a nearby hollow. The old stories keep her alive. After you've met such a creature, silent, waiting, bone deep, just when hope feels smallest, something waits just beneath the water's edge, ready to tug you under. Next, Jenny Greenteeth. 21. Jenny Greenteeth. The first warning you'll hear about Jenny Greenteeth is from a mother to her child when they play too close to ponds, canals, or waterways. "Don't lean over the edge," she'll whisper. "Jenny's teeth will catch you." Because Jenny is no trickster. She's a lurking hazard, a weedy horror, a ghost in the tides. Her name shifts with locale. Sometimes Jenny Greenteeth, sometimes Jenny Greentide. Always water, always danger. Jenny lives in the shadows beneath the surface, among reeds, mossy banks, and murky depths. Her body is said to be slimy, algae-clad, with long green hair that blends into the water. Her face is wet, her mouth wide, her teeth sharp and stained green as river scum. Some tales claim her eyes glow faintly, dripping with water. She doesn't swim swiftly. She drifts. She waits. Children who lean over canal banks to peer at tadpoles or play too close to pond edges are the victims in classic warnings. Jenny will grab your ankles, the stories go. She'll drag you under. Sometimes the narrative softens. She pulls children underwater only as a prank, leaving them shaken but unharmed. But in the versions passed down most fiercely, she claims them lost, never found. In Lancashire and Cheshire, where marshes and canals were once more common, Jenny is well known. Stories claim that at dusk her form drifts just beneath the surface, visible if the moon is right. Her head breaks the water, hair splayed, teeth glinting. Some say she sings in the reeds, a soft lullaby that draws you closer. One old tale describes a woman who wandered too near a canal to fetch water. She looked in, saw Jenny's face grin back, froze, and stumbled. Afterwards, she would never touch that canal again. She claimed she sensed something in the depths, just past the glassy surface, pressing upward. Many local warnings reinforced boundaries. Don't swim in canals at night. Don't wash near the riverbank after dark. Don't fish alone. Many 19th century death records from children near water were quietly chalked up to drowning. But in folklore, they had a name, Jenny. In marshlands, too, the most dangerous paths were those that cut too close to reed beds. The water there is shallow and murky. You think you feel ground beneath your feet. In fact, it may be just weed-logged water over unknown depths. If Ginny lurks, she can ambush the unwary, pull the grasses aside. A hand, a hair, a shimmer of green. Ginny also represents the fear of what lies beneath. Water holds secrets. Drowning is silent. You don't scream in a marsh, you slip quietly. The folk knew this. They made Ginny stories to warn, to teach, to plant fear. And yet, Ginny isn't always monstrous in folklore. Sometimes she's a spirit of the water, one who guards it. She punishes those who pollute rivers or treasure fish illegally. Her teeth might claim a sinner, not an innocent child. In that reading, Ginny is nature's enforcer, a boundary.
Spirit of wetlands, still the uglier version holds tight in local memory. If you walk near canals at night, you may feel your foot slip. You might glance and see green hair drifting just beneath. You might hear a soft splash when none should exist, because Ginny waits where water meets land and where innocence meets danger. When children are told never to stray near a pond, there's a reason. The boundary is old, the margin is thin, and creatures like Ginny remind you that some edges cannot be crossed safely. Up ahead, the waters deepen, the reeds grow thick, and there's another creature who hides not just in water, but in its shadows. Next on the list, Grindylow.
22. Grindylow. There are places where the water doesn't ripple. It broods, where the surface sits still and glassy, not because there's nothing beneath it, but because something is waiting. That's the territory of the Grindylow. Native to Yorkshire and other parts of northern England, the Grindylow is a creature of murky ponds, stagnant pools, and weed-choked canals. It's not just another water spirit. It's not poetic, not romantic. The Grindylow is fear in ankle-deep water. It's the reason children flinch when pondweed brushes their legs. The name itself, Grindylow, sounds like something invented by a child's nightmare. And fittingly, that's exactly how it behaves. Local tales describe the Grindylow as a small greenish creature with long, sinewy arms, a bloated belly, and long, spidery fingers that drag along the bottom of the pond bed. It has bulging, staring eyes and a toothy mouth, never wide open, just smiling, like it knows you'll slip up eventually. The Grindylow doesn't chase, it lurks. Its signature move? Waiting. The moment a child leans too far over the water, or wades in alone, or lingers too long by a reed bed, it strikes. With arms like ropes of wet muscle, it grabs, yanks, and pulls the victim under. Some stories say the Grindylow feeds on its prey. Others say it just holds them, drowns them, keeps them like trophies in the muck. Either way, the result is the same. Don't go near still water alone. Parents for centuries have used the Grindylow to warn their children, stay away from the edge. Don't play near the pond. If you go too far, the Grindylow will get you. It's the ultimate marshland boogeyman, a creature invented not just to entertain or scare, but to protect. Because the danger was, and still is, real. Boggy ground and sudden drop-offs don't forgive curiosity. Neither does the Grindylow. But unlike other folkloric creatures, the Grindylow rarely features in redemption arcs. It's not tragic, it's not misunderstood, it's not looking for lost love or guarding ancient treasure. It's just there. An embodiment of cold danger in warm weather, of something that should not be touched. Some folklorists believe the name Grindylow shares roots with the word grindle, meaning to grind or crush, hinting at something physically powerful, despite its small frame. Others link it to similar beings in Celtic lore, water dwellers with long limbs and foul temperaments. And while the Grindylow never became as globally famous as, say, Scotland's Kelpie, it plays the same role, a warning in the shallows. The creature has even crawled its way into modern fiction, from early English literature to its adapted appearances in fantasy series. The Grindylow continues to live in our collective fear of deep water and what lies beneath. But the modern versions, more monster than myth, often miss the quiet, creeping dread of the original, because the real Grindylow doesn't need to
roar. It just waits beneath the algae, beneath the reflection, beneath you. And when your foot slips, it reaches. But if there's one thing worse than being taken by a creature you never saw, it's having to beg for protection from something that answers only when it feels like it. That brings us into the soggy, shifting land of Lincolnshire, where the water rises with moods and marshes have their own ancient gods. His name is Tiddy Munn.
23. Tiddy Munn, he is small, not in power, but in presence, and that's what makes him dangerous. The Tiddy Munn is a marsh spirit, an elemental guardian of the Lincolnshire Fens, where water stretches flat to the horizon and the sky feels too wide for safety. This is a land shaped by moisture, floods, fogs, and fins that swallow sound, and in the heart of it all, somewhere unseen, lives the Tiddy Munn. Don't let the name fool you. It sounds harmless, whimsical even, but locals never joked about him. To speak of Tiddy Munn lightly was to risk insult, and insulting him could mean waking to find your fields under 6 inches of water, or worse, bone dry when they should be soaked. He is a being of balance, of water in its right place, of rivers that flow where they should, and land that stays firm underfoot. But disturb that balance, drain the marshes, dig without offering, plant without asking, and he takes it personally. Tradition holds that Tiddy Munn appears as a tiny, wizened figure, old as mud, stooped like a bent reed, with a beard of moss and a cloak of mist. His voice is never heard directly, but when he is pleased, the reeds rustle gently. When angered, the wind moans low and the water rises without warning. To appease Tiddy Munn, Fen dwellers developed rituals, one of the most well-known. Just after sunset, villagers would gather near the water's edge and call out, "Tiddy Munn, we out a name, the water's o'er high." Then they would pour out water and bow their heads. If they were respectful, if their tone was right, the floods might subside. It was never guaranteed. Tiddy Munn wasn't a fairy godfather. He was the marsh's conscience, and the marsh did not forgive trespass lightly. His moods weren't limited to water either. Stories tell of Tiddy Munn poisoning crops, turning milk sour, or driving livestock to panic, always when offended, always with reason. One tale speaks of a wealthy landowner who ordered the drainage of a section of fen for farming. Despite warnings, he went ahead without ritual. The very night the work began, a sudden flood took out the fields, and the workers swore they heard giggling in the fog. That same year, blight struck the new crops. By autumn, the landowner had sold the land and moved far inland. The fens have always been eerie, misty, flat, and in that unsettling openness, spirits like Tiddy Munn make perfect sense. They're not just explanations for natural disasters, they're rules, invisible laws to remind humans that nature isn't ours to control, that the ground we build on has its own memory. And today, modern drainage and irrigation have reshaped the Lincolnshire fens, but some farmers still leave offerings on certain days, a cup of ale, a bit of bread, a whispered apology, just in case the old ways still hold weight. Because if the fog gets too thick, if the water doesn't recede, if your footsteps suddenly don't echo the way they should, maybe you forgot to ask Tiddy Munn. And speaking of things that hide in stone and smile too much, let's go to Lincoln Cathedral, where something very small made a very big mistake. Meet the Imp of Lincoln. 24. Imp of Lincoln. You don't expect to find demons in cathedrals, and yet there it is, high above the nave of Lincoln Cathedral. Tucked among the Gothic arches and saints in solemn poses, sits a creature not quite like the others. It's small, winged, grinning, legs crossed like a gremlin on holiday, and it's carved in stone. That's the Imp of Lincoln. And the legend behind that grin? It's as old and strange as the spires that surround it. According to medieval folklore, the imp was once a demon, a tiny troublemaker sent from the underworld to cause havoc in the sacred halls of Lincoln Cathedral. Depending on which version of the story you hear, he was either sent alone as a scout or with a small band of mischief makers tasked with defiling the holy space. He was eager. He knocked over books, scattered hymnals, blew out candles, tied bishops' robes together, the kind of juvenile chaos that would barely rate a mention in other folklore, except for one key moment. He got cocky. Mid-prank, the imp was spotted by an angel. She descended from above in a burst of light and holiness. Unimpressed with his antics, she gave him one warning. He laughed, and so she turned him to stone. That's the story anyway. The reason why this peculiar, impish figure is carved into the upper walls of one of England's most majestic churches, frozen mid-mischief, wings curled, smile smug, forever watching the congregation below. But the story doesn't end there. Some say the imp still moves, ever so slightly when no one's looking, that he whispers bad ideas into the ears of choir boys, that his laughter can be heard in the rafters during storms. He's not just a stone carving, he's a presence. Others claim he wasn't alone, that there are more imps scattered through England's churches, hidden in plain sight, turned to stone, yes, but not silenced, just waiting. The imp of Lincoln became so iconic that he now serves as a kind of mascot for the city. His image appears on everything, from mugs to rugby uniforms. But beneath the commercial cuteness lies something more unsettling, the idea that mischief, once unleashed, doesn't fully die. It just gets stuck. And what makes the legend linger isn't just the prank, it's the punishment, that one moment of defiance frozen in time. It's not every day that a demon is caught mid-laugh and sentenced to an eternity of observation. The smile remains, but the joke is over. Or is it? Some claim the imp was never a demon at all, that he was a trickster spirit or even a wayward fairy who wandered into the wrong place, that his crimes were exaggerated by the cathedral's builders. After all, what better way to remind the people of divine justice than a grotesque carved into the walls? But whether imp or icon, devil or joke, the lesson sticks. Don't mess around in sacred places, especially not when angels are watching. And if you hear giggling in the rafters when no one else is around, don't look up, because the imp of Lincoln is still smiling. And what comes next isn't smiling at all. It has green skin, strange language, and it came from a pit. Next, the Green Children of Woolpit. 25. The Green Children of Woolpit. The story begins with a hole in the ground. In the quiet Suffolk village of Woolpit, nestled among the fields and farmlands of medieval England, something strange happened in the 12th century, something that still echoes in whispered tales and speculative books. Two children, a boy and a girl, were found near a wolf trap, an actual pit dug to catch wolves, the kind that once dotted the English countryside. But these weren't ordinary children. They were green, not ill, not sunburnt, green. Their skin had a distinct greenish hue, described by chroniclers as a soft vegetable color, like the tint of spring leaves. They wore clothes of unfamiliar fabric, spoke no known language, and looked around them with a kind of stunned confusion, as though they had just fallen into the wrong world, which, according to some versions of the legend, is exactly what happened. The children were taken in by local villagers, curious, cautious, and perhaps a little awestruck. At first, the children refused to eat any of the offered food. Days passed. They grew weak. Finally, someone gave them raw beans, and they devoured them with desperate hunger. Eventually, they began to eat normal food, and as they did, their skin lost its greenish cast. They began to learn English, and then they began to talk. What they said didn't help. According to the girl, the boy died shortly after being baptized. They came from a place of no sun, a land of perpetual twilight where everything was dim, and the people lived underground. They claim to have heard bells and followed the sound through a cavern or tunnel. At the other end, they found themselves suddenly, jarringly in Woolpit, and just like that, the story fades into folklore. Some claim they came from a parallel world. Others say it was a fairy realm. More skeptical minds have suggested the children were Flemish immigrants, orphaned and lost, speaking a strange dialect, and suffering from chlorosis, a form of anemia that can give the skin a greenish tint, but that doesn't explain the odd clothes, the unknown language, or why this story was recorded by two separate chroniclers, Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh. These weren't local gossips, they were historians of their day, and so the Green Children of Woolpit remain one of England's greatest unsolved folklore mysteries, a tale of strangers, survival, and the border between worlds. Were they lost travelers, feral children, or emissaries from somewhere we still don't understand? Either way, the story keeps resurfacing. Books, articles, podcasts. There's something about it that taps into a deep unease, the idea that other worlds brush against ours, that sometimes the border cracks and through it, something alien steps in, not in malice, not in violence, just lost. And while the girl reportedly grew up and lived a normal life in the village, that doesn't close the book. If anything, it raises more questions, because if two children stumbled into our world from another, who says they were the last? And if green skin and strange words aren't enough, let's raise the stakes. The next creature isn't mysterious, it's deadly. A creature hatched from legend, with a scream that kills and a gaze that petrifies. It's the cockatrice of Werewell. 26. Cockatrice of Werewell. There are monsters that growl, monsters that stalk, and then there are monsters that stare. In the village of Werewell, Hampshire, there lived, according to legend, a creature born of pure impossibility, a cockatrice, half rooster, half serpent, hatched from an egg laid by a cockerel and incubated by a toad or a snake, depending on the version. The very existence of this beast defied nature, and so, naturally, it was lethal. The story is simple until it isn't. Sometime in the medieval period, a mysterious egg was found in Werewell Priory. It didn't look quite right. It didn't hatch quite right. And what came out wasn't a chick. It was the cockatrice, a twisted hybrid with a scaly body, the wings of a bat, and the crowing head of a rooster. It didn't scratch for grain or flap around helplessly. It hissed. It moved like smoke. It killed. The villagers soon discovered that the cockatrice's gaze could turn a person to stone, or worse, kill them outright. It didn't need to bite. It didn't need to chase. It just looked, and the victim fell. Panic swept through Werewell. No one could get near the thing. It took over the priory, turning the holy place into its lair. Crops withered near it. Livestock vanished. The brave men who tried to confront it with swords or spears collapsed before they could even raise their weapons. The town was stuck until someone had an idea. A mirror. One local hero, unnamed in many versions, a knight or a clever peasant in others, ventured into the priory carrying not a weapon, but a polished piece of metal. He crept through the corridors, careful not to make eye contact, and when the cockatrice appeared, the man lifted the mirror. The cockatrice saw its own reflection and died, or turned to stone, or exploded, or screamed itself into dust. Again, the endings vary, but the message doesn't. The creature's own power undid it. The story of the cockatrice isn't unique to Werewell. Versions of it exist across England and Europe, but here it became local gospel, a monster from myth, born not of a distant land, but right here, in the abbey, in the village, in the place you passed on the way to the bakery. It's the fear of the unnatural made intimate, and though the cockatrice is often confused with the basilisk, another glance-kill serpent, Werewell's version is distinct. It came from a rooster, it nested in a sacred place,
It died by its own vanity, and it left a scar on the local psyche. Today, the priory is gone, but the story lingers. Some say the remains of the cockatrice, or at least its egg, were kept as curiosities for centuries. Others claim the ghost of the thing still stalks the ruins, especially at dusk, when the sun reflects just wrong in the old windows. And here's a final thought. If something like that could be born once, could it happen again? Unlikely, maybe, but if you hear crowing where there should be none, don't look too closely. And
From twisted fowl, we move to something larger, longer, hungrier, because in the rivers of County Durham, a nightmare once wrapped itself around the land. The Lambton worm has arrived. 27. The Lambton worm. If you fish in cursed rivers, don't act surprised when you reel in something older than sin. That's how the story of the Lambton worm begins. Innocent enough. A boy, a line, a river, but the line goes tight, and what comes up is wrong. The tale is rooted in County Durham, specifically the River Wear, near the ancestral lands of the Lambton family. The young John Lambton, skipping church one Sunday morning to go fishing, hauls in something strange, a worm-like creature, black and slimy, with needle teeth and too many eyes. It thrashes, it hisses, and it feels ancient. Horrified, the boy tosses it down a well, or in some versions, into a nearby spring. Then he leaves, off to the Crusades, probably thinking the worst he did was ditch Mass. Years pass, and while John is away, the worm grows, it escapes, slithers from the well like a bad idea returning, and it feeds. Livestock vanish, crops are flattened. The creature coils itself around a hill 10 times, they say, and squeezes, suffocating the land itself. It poisons wells, it demands milk, and if it doesn't get what it wants, it takes. No sword can pierce its hide, no trap holds it. The worm is invincible. And worse, it always returns, regenerating wounds, growing stronger, like it knows no end but hunger. Eventually, John Lambton returns to find his home in ruins, his people in fear, and his name cursed. The worm is his, and so he prepares for the final hunt. An old wise woman gives him advice. Forge a suit of armor studded with razor-sharp blades, and do not fight the worm on land. Lure it into the river. There, its strength is lessened. One last thing she warns. If he kills the worm, he must also kill the first living thing he sees afterwards, or his family will be cursed for 9 generations. John agrees. He meets the worm in the river. The armor works. The creature coils around him, tightens, and cuts itself to ribbons. The Lambton worm, centuries-old terror of the North, dies in pieces, and then John turns to see his father. Too late. He can't bring himself to strike the old man down, and so the curse unfolds. For generations, tragedy shadows the Lambton family. Early deaths, war losses, misfortune, the price of incomplete penance. The Lambton worm story survives in local ballads, stone carvings, and a hill still known as Worm Hill. It's not just a fairy tale, it's a legacy, a warning about negligence, about consequences, about how monsters don't vanish when you stop looking at them. They just wait, and when they grow back, they're harder to kill. But if you think that's the only serpent hiding in County Durham's past, you'd be wrong. Another one slithered through the land, just as feared, and left behind a blade and a legend. Enter the sockburn worm. 28. Sockburn worm. Some monsters live forever in the soil, others in steel. The sockburn worm, like its more famous cousin from Lambton, was said to be a dragon, or worm, as the old texts put it, that plagued the lands of County Durham. But unlike the sprawling epic of the Lambton worm, this legend is tighter, cleaner, quieter. It begins with a beast. It ends with a blade. The story goes that in the village of Sockburn, near the River Tees, a terrible creature emerged from the wilds. The worm was monstrous, long-bodied and scaled, with eyes that burned like forge coals and a breath that withered crops. It didn't speak, it didn't roar, it appeared, and things stopped growing. Villagers vanished, the fields went silent, the land held its breath. But this time, there was no slow burn of despair, no years of watching the thing circle a hill and squeeze, because a man named John Conyers stepped forward. A local nobleman, or in some tales, a brave knight of lesser birth, Conyers didn't wait for advice or prophecies. He took up his sword, mounted his horse, and rode out to face the beast. And unlike most dragon-slaying tales, this one's short. He found the creature. He fought it. He killed it. No riddles, no curses, just blood, fire, and steel. What remains isn't the story, but the ritual, because after John Conyers defeated the Sockburn worm, he was given land as a reward, and with that land came a tradition, one that still echoes through the ceremonial offices of County Durham today. Every time a new bishop of Durham enters the city for the first time, the Lord of Sockburn, or someone standing in his place, presents the bishop with a sword. It's a formal handover with a speech that dates back centuries. "My Lord Bishop, I hereby present you with the falchion wherewith the champion Conyers slew the monstrous worm." That falchion still exists. It's kept in Durham Cathedral, a heavy, battered blade with an arched guard and a plain hilt. Simple, brutal, not ornamental, a tool for slaying, not for show. Some say the ceremony is symbolic, a metaphor for service, land rights, or loyalty, but others see it as something older, something less metaphorical, a quiet agreement between the bishopric and the land, between power and the memory of what once needed to be slain. The Sockburn worm may not have the global fame of other dragons, but it lives in the rhythm of English tradition, in ritual, in blade, and in the sense that not all monsters die. Some are simply handled, and if the blade is ever needed again, it's still there, waiting. And now we slither farther south, out of the riverlands and into the deep wells of West Sussex, where another worm waited in the depths, not on land, but below it. It wasn't slain by armor or prophecy, it was slain by pie. Meet the Knucker of Leominster. 29. The Knucker of Leominster, West Sussex, is home to many quaint things: ivy-covered churches, winding hedgerows, and one dragon that allegedly lived in a bottomless pit. That's the legend of the Knucker, a creature who haunted the countryside near Leominster and dwelled in a pool so deep no one ever found the bottom. The locals called it the Knucker Hole, a name likely derived from the Old English Nichor, meaning water monster, or more grimly, demon of the deep. The Knucker wasn't just a creature of lore, it was geography. That hole, still there, still called that, still avoided by anyone who grew up hearing the stories. As for the beast itself, classic dragon material, long serpentine body, leathery wings, venomous breath, and an appetite that stretched across villages. It flew out of the hole, terrorized the countryside, devoured livestock, and occasionally picked off unfortunate humans. It didn't make demands, it didn't hoard treasure, it just ate. Until one day a hero appeared, or, depending on the version, a baker's boy. That's the strange, delightful twist of the Knucker legend. It's one of the few dragon stories in which the slayer doesn't wear chainmail, carry a holy relic, or ride a charger into battle. He bakes a pie. According to one version, a young man, perhaps a knight, perhaps just clever, offered to slay the dragon in exchange for the hand of a noble's daughter. But rather than face the beast head on, he cooked a massive meat pie laced with poison. He left it at the edge of the Knucker hole. The dragon took the bait, devoured the pie, and promptly dropped dead. In another version, the slayer does go down fighting, sword and courage intact. But after killing the Knucker, he returns home, takes a celebratory drink of water, and dies, suggesting that the dragon's blood or breath was toxic even in death.
Both endings agree on one thing: the Knucker was destroyed, and the village, it built a memorial. Inside St. Mary's Church in Leominster, there's a gravestone believed to mark the final resting place of the dragon slayer. Known as the Slayer's Slab, it's a plain, weathered stone, carved with faint markings and slowly being reclaimed by time. Some say the knight was buried there. Others say it's just a convenient tourist link. But the church and the town keeps the tale alive. And then there's the hole itself. Locals insist the Knucker hole never freezes, that animals won't drink from it, that strange sounds rise from it in winter. Some say it's connected to underground tunnels or even that it reaches the sea. Others call it bottomless. All agree don't go near it alone. The Knucker of Leominster is a rare blend of the terrifying and the absurd, a beast brought low by cleverness and pastry, remembered through ritual, and rooted in the very landscape it once ruled. And yet it's not the last dragon on our list, because to the east, in the mists of Essex, another serpent once
coiled near a churchyard, and this one comes with a bow. The worm of Wormingford awaits. 30. Worm of Wormingford. Wormingford is a sleepy village. Stone cottages, slow roads, and the kind of quiet that hums with memory. But beneath that quiet lies a tale, one that reaches back to dragon fire and churchyard smoke. The worm of Wormingford isn't just another dragon, it's the dragon of Essex, and like all good dragons, it arrived with appetite. The story begins with a lake, or sometimes a river bend where something massive began to stir. Locals spoke of livestock disappearing, strange marks in the mud, and a feeling of pressure in the air. The worm was said to be long and scaled, with a mouth full of jagged teeth and a tail that thrashed like a whip. It didn't speak, it didn't bargain, it simply emerged and fed. The people prayed, the church bells rang, but the creature circled closer and closer to St. Andrew's Church, as if drawn to the sacred ground. That's where the legend turns. One day, a bowman stepped forward. Some say he was local, others claim he was passing through. A hunter, a soldier, a wanderer with nothing to lose. What matters is what he did. He took aim, he fired, and the arrow struck true. The worm died, according to the tale, not with a roar, but with a shudder. It collapsed near the church and was buried, or vanished, or simply rotted into the ground, depending on which version you hear. To this day, Wormingford keeps the memory close. Some say the old church has markings tied to the event. Others claim the dragon's bones were once displayed, then lost, but the name itself, Wormingford, endures, a reminder, a warning, a signpost for something that once came out of the water and almost made the village a ruin. The worm of Wormingford is less flashy than its cousins. No sprawling saga, no cursed knight, just a creature, a threat, and a moment of courage. But sometimes that's all you need, because the monster was real, and it was here, and it was ended, just not forgotten.